Hey guys, and welcome to this how-to on how I do weather tracks, and this time especially tracks that are in use in cold, snowy conditions where the mud is more or less frozen and the snow is this like very thin powdery snow as you know it when it's like very cold. As you can see, I've already prepared the tracks. Those are full Winterketten, and they were burnished using AK Interactive's burnishing fluid. I have recently, I don't know, made the discovery that the AK burnishing fluid and full tracks, for some weird reason, seem to not like mesh as well as you would like, and that's why the result is rather, well, medium, I would say. I was hoping for a bit better result than what I was able to achieve. So, but since we're going to cover a lot of this with mud, pigments, and snow, anyways, I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing at this point in time. So, before we get started, let me quickly run you through the products that we will be using. Of course, we need a medium that basically lets us create mud first, and I have been using the Reality and Scale Mud in a Pot, but this stuff is just way too expensive considering how much you get in the box. So I decided to go with something different, and then I used Wilder's Textured Earth, stony textured earth, light brown, but the texture is a bit too coarse. So this time around, we are going to use this. This is AK Interactive's Terrains Paint Muddy Ground Acrylic from the diorama series. There you have the code AK8017. Let me open this for you so you can see the consistency of this. This is a brown acrylic paste with texture added to it, and you can see the consistency here. It's well, thicker than milk. It has a gooey consistency, and we will be applying this first to create our texture, our mud texture. After that, we will be using MIG pigments. First, we have dark mud. Sadly, I lost the labels, so you cannot like figure out the number here. And as you can see, it's a brownish color, and I'm almost out of it. So yeah, it's a brownish color. And we are going to use Russian Earth again. Sadly, I lost the label. They seem to get lost. And this is a rather blackish brown tone here. So MIG pigments for this. And then, of course, like I said, we want to add some of this very dry snow that you get when it's really cold. And for this, I am using this. This is AK Snow Micro Balloons. Again, an acrylic product. AK8017. 10. Sorry. And as you can see, this is a very fine powder. Almost the consistency of flour. And I sprinkle this on once the pigments are set, and after I actually fix the pigments with pigment fixer, because once you then add the pigment fixer and then add the microballoons, the pigment fixer also fixes the microballoons to your tracks. In addition to that, of course, we need brushes. I'm using this old like soft bristle brush right here for the mud application. I might use a smaller one than this one, and then I use this, well, stiff bristle brush right here for applying the pigments later on. So the first step, of course, is to use the mud texture for the base layer. What you should do, of course, is always have a bit of tap water handy to clean your brush, so you don't like mess it up completely. And since those are movable, like metal tracks, you want to make sure not to like totally like slash them in mud, because that way you might make it hard for you to actually move them. And I'll demonstrate this process with one of the tracks, and then we'll have to let them sit for a while. I'll take a break from filming, then I'll come back once it's dry, and I'll apply the pigments and the microballoons. So what you want to do is you want to start out with the AK paste, and I hope you can see this. Let me try to get some more light in there in the shot. Can you see this? Is this well lit? Yeah, it is properly lit. And you want to give this, you want to wet your brush first, and then you want to dip it in there. And as you can see the consistency of this stuff. It's got some texture to it. And then you want to just put it where you would think there's mud. And as I said, you might want to be careful because you don't want to like make them immovable in the end. So, but you don't have to be like overly careful. I'm not saying just like, I don't know, don't put anything in there. You can have some of them be a bit muddier than others, and you need to keep in mind that once this starts to dry a bit, you can then create a little more texture by stippling the mud with a stiff brush to add a bit more surface texture. And of course, what you're doing to one side of the track, you will have to repeat on the other side and see what the lighting situation is, because the camera situation does not allow me to look at the camera while I'm doing this, so you have to bear with me here. I hope that the lighting is actually up to snuff, otherwise, if not, I will have to redo this with the other track. Let's hope I don't have to. And of course, since I've zoomed in, you can only see a small part of it. Let me zoom out a bit. There you go. You can see a bit more. Every once in a while, you might go in there again and add a bit more. Always trying to keep in mind that, like I said, the mud is frozen solid, and you are not like slushing this with wet mud. And make sure to like not forget about the sides here, because they would have mud on them as well. So touch up the sides as well. Don't only focus on the inside of the track. Alright. So now you've seen how I do this. Just stipple it on. Let me see if I can zoom you in a bit closer so you hopefully can see. It's very dark. Let me move this up. I hope, oh yeah. That way you can see it a lot better. There you go. The mud is in there. And I will now have to let this dry before we can add the pigments in the next step. So I'll be back as soon as this is dry and we can add the pigments. And for you guys, it's just a snip of fingers. So I'll be right back. Alright guys, the paint has now had enough time to dry, so next up we will be using a little bit of a stiffer, like a little bit of a bigger brush, like this one. And first we start with the light brown pigment. As you can see, we take a nice big amount and just shove it in there. Like, no need to be careful. No need to be like too what's the word? Subtle, because we will be blending these pigments in a second anyways when we add the darker ones. And we want the tracks to be as muddy as possible. Let me try and zoom in just to tell you no. No, won't manage. Hope you guys can see this. I like working with pigments. It's not the cleanest way to do stuff, but it allows you to like do a lot of three-dimensional stuff that kind of adds, in my opinion, adds a lot to the models. And tonal variation and this kind of stuff. And I know that there are people out there who really don't like pigments and who really prefer to weather with acrylics, especially when it comes to tracks, and use oils when it comes to their model surface. Like adding dust with oils is also a distinct possibility, and I agree that this is also an option. So I don't think there's like a perfect, or like there's one, like only one solution to do this. I think there are multiple ways of doing this. And I believe, and as you can see, it will of course almost always end in a messy situation on your bench. That's why I use both paper as well as paper towels to protect the underneath parts of the bench. And if you use the paper like I do, you can then save the pigments that you spilled and put it back in the jar, which I'm currently doing off camera. Just roll up the piece of paper and put it back in the jar. All right, let me put the track back here. All right, there we go. There's the track. Oops. There we go. Okay. Now that we have added the first layer of pigments, now it's time for the darker layer. And this is the more important layer because the groundwork on our dio base is a rather darkish brown. And as you can see, look at the way we are dirtying them up. And hope that, no, I'm actually not in the shot, sorry. We are adding a ton of dark pigment now to our track. And again, it's not important that you have like the same color on all of your track links. It's actually quite the opposite. I love it when you have like different shades of brown on your track links because this adds tonal variation. And variation kind of makes this look a lot more interesting and a lot more realistic. So that's why I like it. And we want to like kind of create the look of these tracks having some mud collected in them, definitely, but the mud being frozen and the dirt being frozen because of the very low temperatures that were going on during the Battle of Kursk. So, as you can see, you cannot see a lot. Again, let me take the track off of here and take the paper. And like I said, I'll be, and let me show you this. I can show you this on camera how I do this. I just take the jar, then I take the piece of paper, and I'll just basically fold it like this, and then tilt it, have the pigment flow back in the jar. And there we go. Now we did not waste all too much of our pigment. Now the fun starts. You can either do this with a brush or you can do it with a pipette. And for this, I'll zoom out a bit, and we need to lay out a bit more paper towel, because now we are going to use liquids and fluids, and I don't want to soak my cutting mat underneath in the liquids. So spread out a healthy amount of paper towel, kitchen towel, just enough to soak up all the liquids. Then spread out your tracks, and then we need the pigment fixer. And first I'm going to show you how to do it with the pipette. Of course, the pipette is broken. Yep. Can't show you the pipette because the pipette is broken. Great. So much for that. So, gonna do it with a brush then. I need a decent sized brush. You can use the brush that you used for the pigments. That's not a problem. And we'll do it going to do this right now. So all you have to do is take the brush, wet it in the pigment fixer, and then just drip it on. Of course, this is a rather tedious task, which is why using a pipette might be the better way to go here. But like I said, my pipette is sadly broken, and you don't want to touch the tracks with the brush, but rather use capillary action and have the pigment fixer kind of flow onto the tracks and soak all through the pigment. And as you can see, capillary reaction allows us to just do this like this, and I'll zoom in so you guys can actually see how this works with. I'm sorry for the lighting. I have no clue why it's so dark on the camera. There we go. The pigment fixer is an enamel that dries flat, so it won't look wet. Right now they look wet, but they will dry flat, perfectly flat, and it will look like dry mud once it's dry, and the pigments will be fully fixed to your tracks. If those were plastic tracks, I would not be doing it like this, because plastic normally does not like enamels. So if this were plastic, I would have to find a different way to fix them onto it. Probably would not be using pigments, but maybe acrylic, an acrylic fixer. So I'll be just finishing this track run, and once it's dry, or at least once it's all applied, I'll be right back. Okay guys, so now that we have applied the pigment fixer to our tracks, we now have the opportunity to add the microballoons onto the wet track, which will then allow the microballoons to settle in the pigment fixer and be fixed to the model as well. We use a small spatula like this, which is actually like this kind of spatula that you get at like at a doctor when they want to like look in your throat. So you just tip the tip in there, take out some of the snow, and then just see if you can see this. Yeah, just slightly move it over the top. You don't want to like cover all of it. You just want to give it a light dusting. So like have some areas where it's a bit heavier, where there's a bit more snow, have other areas where there's a little less snow, maybe even no snow at all. Just make it your own, right? And the good thing, since our pigment is still wet, it will kind of color some of the snow in a like brownish yellowy tone, which dirty snow basically has. So let me zoom out a bit so you can see the full track run here. And then just like this, try to get like some of the snow on the outside. And there we have it. That's basically all you got to do to like add some snow to the track. And I can now let this sit overnight, and then we come back and I'll show you guys how the track looks once it's dry, and then we'll do our final touches, turn it around to the other side, and last thing we are going to do is clean the top surfaces of the tracks where the track actually has contact with the ground, because they would be bare metal, and I'll show you how I do this tomorrow once this is all dry. So I will be back as soon as this is dry. For you, this is right now.
Alright guys, like you see, or as you see, the track has now had the time to dry, and I've done the backside of the tracks as well. And as you can see, we did the exact same thing. We added the mud first, and then we sprinkled on the snow. And this is the way the other side looks, as you can see. Beautifully looking, muddy and snowy tracks with snow on a couple of spots, and the other side as well. Keep in mind, you always have to keep the running, the area where the road wheels run free of mud, because, well, it stays free of mud because the road wheels always take the mud back off. So again, let me compare this to the unweathered track so you guys can see the difference. This is the unweathered track, and as you can see, on one side we have the dust, the dirt, the mud, and the snow. On the other side you don't have that. Now let me flip them around so you guys can see both sides. Again, this is the unweathered track. This is the weathered track. Look at the difference. I think it's striking. Yeah. And I love the results that I achieved today. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this, well, look into how I do tracks. And I hope to see you guys soon. This is Holland Modeling. Bye for now, and may the force be with you.